Hi there, I'm MVArt and welcome back to a new video in the series of Iron Scott. We are almost there, we can almost start animating this cute little character. But before we can do that, we have to build a rig. Usually I use Rigify to rig my characters, mostly because I want to do a quick rig and I don't want to spend a lot of time building the rig because I just want to get to the fun part, and for me that is animating. Like I said, we could build our rig ourselves, but it's pretty time consuming. On the other hand, Rigify is an awesome tool that is a pre-built rig. It's highly customizable. Best of all, it comes within Blender. Installing Rigify is simple and easy. You just go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, scroll down till you see Rigify, or you can go up here and type into the search bar Rigify. You see that I have it enabled already. If you haven't, just check this checkbox. With the add-on enabled, we can now add the rig to our scene. You can do that by hitting Shift A, and in this menu go to Armature. You can see that we have a couple of options. That is single bone, human meta rig, animals, there are a lot of animal rigs here, and the basics. For this character, I don't think we need anything else than the Rigify default. That is Armature, human meta rig. I'm gonna click it right now. Why I choose this one over the other one is because it's easier to delete bones than it's to add them into your Rigify rig. With the meta rig in the scene, I want to be organized and say M, move it to a new collection, made a new collection and call it meta rig. And okay, it's in its own collection right here in the top hand corner on the right in the outliner. When we've generated the rig, later on you have your full setup with the controls and all the handy dandy stuff, and you don't need to see the meta rig anymore, and you can just disable it in the layers here. For now, bring it back, and in fact we can disable the character, because the next step I want to do is select the meta rig, go into edit mode by tap and going into edit mode, and I want to get rid of the face. But first of all, hit the end menu, select the tool tab and enable the x-axis mirror. This allows us to work on one side and it will be mirrored over to the other side as well. Quite time saving. This also means I don't have to be very careful while selecting the face. I can just select this portion and say delete. This leaves me with one remaining bone here. But in fact, if I go into wireframe mode, I can see, and you should be aware of this as well, that there is one more face bone and it's hidden inside the head bone. So I'm going to delete that one as well. Go back to solid mode. I don't need to be in wireframe mode. And I see that there are some breastbones and I think I can get rid of those. Maybe you need to keep them, I don't know, but in my case I don't need them. Swiftly moving on to the hands, I see that we have 5 fingers and my character just has a thumb, and I would like to think of it as a giant pinky. So I'm gonna select these 3 bones, Ctrl L, select these 3 as well, press X and say delete bones. Just a quick example, if you want to add a tail, you can go into the Armature tab here, search in the Rigify buttons for spine.basic _ tail, add sample, and there you have it. Now my character could have, in theory, a tail. Moving on, going out of edit mode, going out of wireframe mode, bringing back our character, we can see that our character is not aligned with the armature. And of course that is quite necessary to have a functional rig. So that might be just the next thing we're gonna do. Adjusting the meta rig is quite easy. We can go back into edit mode. I want to quickly say in the armature tab, I want to go to viewport display and say in front. Okay, for the placement of this, I would like to say I start with the arm. Before I start, I want to go into the end menu, go to tools on the right hand side here and enable the x-axis mirror. What does it do? You can see what it does. It mirrors all the transformations I do on the right hand side. So first I'm gonna move it down and move it roughly where I think the clavicle of this character is gonna be. Okay, we have to be very conscious about placing our pivot points. Points like the shoulder, the elbow, or the wrist. For example, this point is gonna be the rotation point of the shoulder. How I determine the exact spot of this point and where I want it to be located is pretty easy. I go out of edit mode, like I just did. I select the character, go into edit mode right there, maybe even go to isolation mode with the slash key, and then I select the loop that I think resembles the point of rotation. Then I did shift and cursor to select it. And right here is my anchor point. Go out of isolation mode. Go into edit mode for the armature. Select this bone, and that is the upper arm. And this is the shoulder. With that selected, say Shift S again. Selection to cursor. Again, go into edit mode for the armature. Say Shift S and selection to cursor. Keep offset. This looks more like it. I want to do the same thing for the elbow. I would say it's probably in between there. Cursor to selected. That's where I would like to have my elbow. Go back into edit mode for the armature. And now I want to deselect the upper arm. Shift S, selection to cursor with the forearm active. And there you go. It was just a tiny snap because the forearm was already quite in a good place. Using the period key, I want to say use normal mode. I want to rotate over the x-axis. I want to rotate over the z-axis. Doing the same thing over and over again for the arm. You know how it is. So I'm gonna do this for the rest of the arm and maybe the legs. And you see me when I'm done because I have a lot of other things I want to talk about. So I'll see you there, be right back. For this part, I see that the bones are not rolled as I wanted. Like you see here, the bones in the hand are pointing back with the x-axis. It's rotating over the z-axis. Another way to set the roll is by selecting the bones you want to influence. Say Ctrl R and you can just roll them. Ctrl R and then I'm gonna type in 180. That is pretty much like I wanna have them. I made a mistake here, but it's easy to fix. I just need to drag these back a bit more because right now I have a 3-jointed thumb and that is not what you have. Our thumb has like 2 joints and there's this thumb meat and there's of course a joint in there as well. And that joint is resembled in the rig with this now active bone. So I'm gonna drag it back to around there and scale. Let me quickly go to pose mode and let me quickly see if the hand is the parent of the thumb. It is. I just wanted to make sure that was correctly set up. It is. So let's continue. Moving on with the legs, I will speed through them. And when I arrive at the foot, I have to show you something that is quite interesting and you have to know about the Rigify rig. See you in a bit. What you want for this bone is that it's placed at the absolute furthest point of the side of the foot. With that said, grab this point, switch back to medium point, and grab it and snap it to this point. One more time. There you go. By the way, I select this point. I don't have to enable snapping down here. I just can say G, X and hold Control and now I snap. And this is the furthest point of the left side of the shoe. Now for the spine there are a couple of things you should know. I'm going to show you this by generating the rig. Go into the armature tab when you're in object mode and say generate rig. I quickly gonna disable the character so we only see the rig. Now what I want to show you, and especially for the spine, is that there are some weird placement. In my character especially, the rig is a bit more squashed, it's a ball, and the body of this character isn't that tall. On the other hand, the rig has a very long spine. It's like 7 bones. Let me tell you this, it's super handy to know that certain controls are generated from certain bones. So for example, this chest control, it is generated from the base of the 3rd bone from below. So 1, 2, 3. This is the chest again, and you see the rotation point is right here. The hip control that's located right here rotates from the same area, the base of the third bone. We can see that the neck control is rotating from the base of the third bone, counting from the top. Without further ado, let me place the spine bones. Bring back the character. So like I said, the base of the third bone is going to determine where the hip is going to rotate from and where the chest is going to rotate from. For my character, I think the chest is going to be this area. When I look in front view, you can see that it's almost aligned already. I have to drag it down a bit. I can drag this down a bit for a bit more of an equal distribution of the spine. Another thing to note was that the base of the third bone, counting from the top, is where the neck is going to be. Dragging down this bone, dragging down this bone, cursor to selected, select this, make this one the active, period key, active element, you know the drill, Shift S, selection to cursor, keep offset. Also, I'd like to point out that the head rotation is going to be from this point, and I like personally to have that point in the middle of the face. So I'm going to drag it down. I'm going to place this point a bit lower. Also, this point a bit lower. And the end of the head doesn't really matter, but you can place it there. There's a nice curve. The clavicle bones are placed correct. What I like to do is I like to point them down a bit towards the shoulder. The overall placement of the bones looks pretty good. I spot down here at the ankle that I misplaced the ankle because it should rotate from around this point, and that is our meta rig. I go out of edit mode. When we go into the armature tab right here, the running man, I enable the advanced settings because when I don't do that or I have it disabled, I get an error. You can see that, I don't know why it is, but you can see that the left leg is flipped somehow. I got around that by enable the advanced options and say new. If I say generate rig right now, you can see that it's all sorted out. The nice thing about Rigify is that there are a couple of things in here already. So if I go into pose mode for this nice system, you can see that I can first close the meta rig here. You can see that I can have a IK rig or I can have a FK. And in the items menu, I can switch. So if I select the IK hand, for example, and I switch IK to FK, another nice thing about Rigify is that you have these options. That is the rig layers on the right hand here. If you don't see it, it's here. If you really don't see it, you can open up a new window, go to text editor, and there's your rig UI.python, and you have to select one and run the script. For now, I'm going to close this window. This is nice because you never work with so many layers on it. Quite distracting, at least that's what I think. So usually I say I don't use the arm IK and I don't use the leg FK. For now, I don't want to tweak anything. So I disable these layers. The finger details are not necessary right now. And this is already less cluttered than what we had before. So that's really nice. So these are just a couple of options you have in the Rigify that are built in. One more thing is quite awesome. That is and I have to enable the left arm IK as well, so you can properly see it. If I move the arm right in the position, doesn't really matter. If I select the IK right now, you can see that I can snap the IK to the FK hand. And that is an option that I quite like instead of manually having to do it, because that's just a pain in the neck. For now, I'm gonna select all, reset the rig by Alt R and Alt G. And if you have skilled something, Alt S as well. If we move something right now, you can see that the mesh isn't following along with the rig. That's okay because we have to link it to the rig. There are multiple ways to do this, and I'm not gonna show you all of them. I'm just gonna show you what I usually do. So in this particular case, we're working with hard surface models and organic models like the character itself. For the organic stuff, I usually use a mesh deform cage. That is a modifier that is literally a cage around your model that pulls the vertices in a direction. For Iron Scott, I already got a mesh cage. That is because Scott is a character I've used before. I quickly looked up the file in my Explorer and I opened it up in a new Blender tab, or in a new Blender file, I'm sorry. And here you can see that I can enable the mesh cage layer. I can Ctrl C, go back to the previous one and go out of pose mode and tap right there. Now it copied over a lot of other stuff as well. So let's move this. So move the whole selection to a new collection because it's easier to clean up that way. I call this mesh cage. For now, disable everything else. I can select the first widget, scroll down. There's a long list of widgets. Hold shift, press again, and then say delete. So this is our rig. I'm gonna make a new collection for the rig as well. Conveniently call it rig. And rename this to Iron Scott .rig. Now I understand not everyone has already a mesh cage, but it's quite easy to get one. Usually what I do, if I'm making a character, you probably, and I switch to the other blend file for a second, you probably have made your body at some point, the full body. Usually what I do is I delete the body under the clothing because it's just extra geometry that you don't need to see. But to start off, you have probably a full body of a character. For the sake of an example, say this is still connected. And close off these. So say this is our body. So I would go into edit mode and I would say Alt S and then grow the mesh a bit bigger. What you always can do is go into the object tab, view per display, and set it to wireframe. So when you place it back over the mesh, you can see it's now overlapping with the mesh. So that is how I create a mesh cage. Going out of this blend file and back into this one. So then in edit mode you can see it's a pretty low resolution mesh, and that is totally fine. But what I would suggest you do is to the places where you think you need it, add some more geometry. So I'm gonna do it here at the elbow section, and usually what is advised is to go triangulate those areas. On the other hand, at the back side you don't need that. You can even get rid of these and have a longer elongated polygon right there, because it's gonna bend around this point. Pretty rudimental, but okay. It's gonna bend like this and probably not the other way around. So you don't need that much definition in the back of the elbow. Another thing I could do is select these two loops, or maybe 3 loops here, and triangulate them with Ctrl T. Sorry if I didn't mention that before. Do that on the other side as well. Ctrl T. Then I like to triangulate these areas as well. So everything that is a joint you could triangulate. For hard surface parts, I usually just parent it directly to the bone because they're not gonna deform, and you just want them to stick to a particular bone. In some cases you might have to be a bit more creative with it. Change it back to wire. For the next bit I want to disable the character and I want to bring back the rig into view. Also I should have left this on solid. So how we go about this is you select your mesh cage and you select your rig. There are a couple of options here, but what I usually do is Ctrl P and then you get into your parenting mode, but you're not gonna just parent it. It's not gonna be a one-on-one parent. So normally if you parent it, of course, if you move the rig, the whole thing moves. If I select the rig and I go into pose mode and I move an individual piece, it's not gonna influence the mesh as you would have expected it. So I'm quickly gonna undo. So first select the mesh cage and then the rig, Ctrl P. And what I usually do is with automatic weights. And there you have it. This is the list of all the bones that are gonna be deforming the mesh. Tap and go into weight paint mode. you can see that, where's my selected vertex groups, the def spine 06 is deforming this part of the mesh. So the bluer it gets, the lesser the influence of this bone. The redder it gets, you guessed it, the more influence the bone has on the mesh. Automatic weight did a decent job for us. If I just go up with my arrow key and I can see the influence of the bones on the mesh cage, and for now this is pretty okay. But keep in mind, you can always go into a particular one and say you can add, you can darken, draw, lighter, mix, multiply or subtract. But that's not all. On the T menu on the left hand side you have a draw in, and that's where we're in right now, but you can also blur, average, smear, gradient, etc, etc. For the sake of this tutorial, this is probably going to be fine. As you can see right now, if I move this bone, the mesh cage is following along. Apparently the ear is moving when I do this as well. This is something that I told before. If you want to adjust these kind of settings, I'm not going to do it for this tutorial, but you have to go into the vertex groups and into weight paint mode, or you can do it in edit mode and reassign or readjust the vertex weights. There are a couple of things I want to do, and they won't make sense until we get to the actual binding of the mesh. So stay with me, we're going to get there. I'm going to select the character and I want to go back to the vertex groups. Here I want to make a new one that is called no m def. Later on we're going to add a modifier that is called mesh deform, that is going to use the mesh cage to deform the actual body. And the no m def vertex group is going to determine what parts of the mesh are going to be deformed by the mesh cage and what parts of the mesh are going to be deformed by the actual armature. So with that said, we're going to add some weights to our vertex group here. Go into edit mode. I want to select the whole hand here. The other one as well. You can come over to the right hand side and we can just say assign. If I visualize this by going into weight paint mode, you can see that everything is red that we selected and the rest is just black or not influenced. Okay. Before we continue, I want to make sure that our mesh cage is completely surrounding our mesh. So go into edit mode. So for example, the leg here should be completely covered. The shoes are not that important, but we can make sure it's in there. And like I said, the legs and the arms should be in there. So I'm going to disable this mesh cage collection for a second. I'm going to select the body, go into the modifiers tab, and add a new modifier that is the mesh deform modifier. Bring it on to the top with the arrow, and you can add in an object that is going to be our mesh cage. Bring back the mesh cage. You can use this eyedropper tool and pick it out of the scene, or you can just search in the list for mesh cage. Just to check out if it is working, you can use a precision of 5, say bind. So the whole mesh that you want to deform has to be inside of the mesh cage. If I didn't stress that enough, I say it again, it has to be inside of the mesh cage. The mesh cage is gonna be deformed by the armature. So if I select the armature, in the item steps, I wanna bring back the root. I wanna select the root, and if I move it, you can see that the body is completely moving. The ankles are completely moving, but the hands are just not, because, and that it makes sense, you can see that the fingers are outside, and you can see that parts of the hands are probably outside. Keep in mind that you have applied your mesh deform cage before your subdivision modifier. So actually you should look at it without the subdivision modifier, and then you can see that for example this point is going through the mesh cage. So keep that in mind. In this case it doesn't really matter, because we want our hands to be deformed by the actual armature, because it's a more intricate movement and it needs a bit more finesse. We already began to set up the vertex group for this, and now we have to do the other part. We can select the hand like we had before, select the armature, say Ctrl P, then say armature deform with automatic weights. Now, If I go out of this mode, select the hands, you can see that we have an armature. I want to bring it on top of the subdivision modifier. As you can see, I can unbind the mesh deform, and I'm gonna do that. In the mesh deform and in the armature, you can see that there is a vertex group. You can search for no MDEF and search here again for no MDEF. Because we weighted the no MDEF vertex group for the hands completely red, that means full influence. You want the mesh deform modifier to invert this vertex group. And for the armature modifier, you should leave it as it is. If I select the hands and go into object data, weight paint mode, and I look up the hands, you can see that they are weighted. So if I go down, 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 it also weighted the body, but I think that's not necessary. So we can delete every vertex group that is not related to the hands. Now, if I go out of object mode for this one, select the rig, go into pose mode, and I can try out. And this is on control for the finger, and if I scale it, you can see that it bends. If I'm being honest, the auto weight paint did a decent job, but you have to go in there and clean it up. I'm gonna do that off screen so you don't have to see it, but yeah, just so you know. The thumb is working as well. I don't know why the nail isn't, but that's a matter of going in there, selecting this, assign it completely to the no MDEF. Did I fix it? Yes, that fixed it. Go in there, select it, no MDEF, and assign the complete nail to the no MDEF. Now, one more time, scale it, and that fixed it. I can select the arm, and maybe you have more parts that you need to do, but I have only the arm left, so I'm gonna add a mesh deform modifier, search for mesh cage, it's mesh cage 01, and bind it to the mesh cage. Test it out. You see everything is moving, there are no vertices dragged behind, and that means it's perfectly bound. We can do it again, if you like. Check it out. I am gonna select the leg. I'm gonna go into the object data, add a new vertex group, say no MDEF for no mesh deformation. Go into the modifiers, add a mesh deform, and choose the mesh cage. We don't have to bind it just yet. Place it on top, select the leg again, select the rig, Ctrl P, weight with automatic weights. Back into the object data tab. We can see that we have a whole lot more of the vertex group right now, but we need the no MDEF. Right now it's just all black. That's fine. We have to select the legs. It is completely selected, and I want to assign this to the no MDEF vertex group. And I want to assign this to the no MDEF vertex group. Visualize it one more time so you can see it. There it is. Go back to the modifier stack, lift up the armature modifier, and in here say no MDEF. You can copy it and paste it in here, and for this one we need to say reverse the no MDEF in the armature modifier. And if I now grab the leg, save it, grab the leg, and this should work. So it is moving the lower leg, it's not moving the upper leg, and that's because I made a mistake and I didn't bind the mesh. Fortunately for me, binding level precision 5 is quite quick, and you can test out your mesh quite quickly. There you go. And as you can see, there are some points that are not completely inside of the mesh cage. So we have to fix that. So select everything and unbind. I want to get rid of the rig because it's cluttering my interface. Go into the mesh deform cage. We're almost there. This is just a matter of proper weighting, and this is a matter of the mesh cage not being fully surrounding the mesh. So I'm gonna go into object mode for this one, unbind, and disable the subsurface. just to visualize it better, I'm gonna disable in front and say solid. And now you can see that there are some parts that are still poking through the mesh cage. Grab this, scale it up quite a bit, and just work your way around the mesh. Bring back the rig. Go into the modifiers tab, try and bind it again. Grab the leg. And there you go. So what I usually do for the hard surface parts delete everything here. And I want to make a new one, but I have to look it up. So it's probably the shin. There you have it. It's def for deformation dash shin.l or r. That's the one I need. Make a new vertex group by hitting the plus sign and paste that in there. Make a new one and paste and remove the L and make it an R. For this vertex group, I want to select the left shin parts, just like that. And I want to assign it completely to the vertex group, just like this, and do that for the other one as well. You see? Now if I move it, it should work fine. You see? And like we discussed before, there are some limitations in the rig, but you can always work around it. So I'm gonna repeat this for the other parts as well. I guess you should as well. I'll see you in a bit. Spine, all these spines ones I don't need. So these are the vertex groups I need. I'm gonna select everything, I guess, and then remove everything from these groups. Like so. I'm gonna select the dev toe right and select these two and say assign. Do the same thing here. Toe left in that case. Then select these two, invert the selection, go to wireframe, deselect all the left hand side, screen left hand side, that is, foot left, assign. Then I can say select this one, select this one, select this one, and invert the selection again. And I'm left with the dev foot R and say assign. So we're almost there. I'm gonna disable this mesh cage in the viewport, and I wanna grab the hair, grab the head control there, say Ctrl P and parent it to the bone. So now this works. At last, I want to get this piece to move nicely along with the arm, because right now it really doesn't. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into here, go into edit mode, select this bone, duplicate it, hit P and separate that. Now I have this rig. I want to call this forearm rig. In the bone settings, go to the viewport display and disable the custom shape here. Then in edit mode, call this forearm.right. With the object still selected, say symmetrize, and there you go. Now the next thing I want to do is select these two, hit Alt F to switch the direction of the bone. Now with that in place, I want to select the arm piece, select the bones there, say Ctrl P, and with automatic weights, can I grab this one? And does it move? No, it doesn't move. So apparently these bones are set to non-deform, so I have to set them to deform. Go back into object mode, select the arm piece again, select the armature, Ctrl P, and say with empty groups, that's fine. Go in here, I can go into edit mode, I can select all, go into wireframe mode, deselect this part, and say assign. Invert the selection, and select the left forearm and say assign. Go back into solid mode, go back into object mode, select the armature, select the pose mode, and there you have it. Okay, now still this doesn't move along with the arm. And we're gonna fix that in 1 second. Let's set up the left arm first. Go into the bone constraints, that's this one on the bottom. Add a child of, select with the eyedropper tool the iron scot rig, and for the bone type in hand and say set inverse, so it pops back into place. Now if I select the hand and move it, you can see that it follows along, and that's okay, but I have to manually rotate it, and you don't want that, because sometimes I want to rotate the hand like this and I want this bone to keep it like that, but we don't want to do that manually, of course. Everything in the rig that you can do automatically is so much more animator friendly, so I encourage you to do that. Reset this, grab this bone again, add another constraint that is a track to. What this is going to do, it's going to tell the bone to point always to a object, or in this case another bone. So I'm going to select the target again. The target is the iron scot rig, and I want to select the forearm, and I want to select forearm left .001. So I'm going to select the bone because it's flipped. I'm going to select the bone in edit mode, and I'm going to say Ctrl R to adjust the roll and say 180, and now it should be fine. With that in place, you can select the other bone and then select the bone we just did. Go into F3 and say copy constraint to selected bones. F3 might be spacebar in your case, I'm not sure. Select this one and change it to right hand side, set inverse, and then change this constraint also to the right side. Do the same thing again, go into edit mode, select this bone, Ctrl R, 180 degrees, and there you go. Now if I move this bone in pose mode, select the IK controller, and you see that it moves quite nicely. It sometimes flips. To fix that, I chose another constraint, and that is the damp track instead of the track 2. So you can do that on the other side as well. Get rid of this one, add a damped track, select the iron scot rig again, and say forearm right .001. So that's quite nice. Now we can select this rig and say disable in viewport. Perfect. So, besides from a couple of weighting issues, I think the rig is done. I'm pretty happy with it. And you can see the final result, of course, in the download files. You can download the files from my new website, it's mvrts.com, and the link will be in the description, so check that out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you find this useful, please leave a like, leave a comment. Do you have any questions? Feel free to ask them. If you want to see more content in the future, subscribe to the channel. As always, stay creative, keep safe. Till next time, ciao.